Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to a new show here on NWTV7 Live on Twitch. Welcome to the guys who stare at stats. I'm your host, Cade Kennedy, alongside my co-host, Connor Gray.
What's up?
And over the next few hours, maybe hours, I don't know how long we'll be here this evening.
Pretty much.
We'll be talking about college football, NFL, even some NBA news that came out today. And we'll be discussing and previewing the upcoming college football season. So the first thing I want to get started with here today, Connor, is obviously Hurricane Ida and how it has already impacted college sports. OU at Tulane was supposed to be a nice road trip to New Orleans for several Oklahoma fans.
Pretty much.
That game has been moved to Norman. OU has announced that all revenue from the game will go to Tulane, which I think is a really nice thing to do.
Oh, yeah, because they're the ones who are going to be the most heavily impacted by Hurricane Ida because obviously you got to move the game.
However, one thing I am excited to see, Friday morning, OU will announce the ticket sales and it'll be a kind of similar to the Roland Run of the 1800s. We will see probably about 50,000 people claim tickets in about the span of 15 minutes.
Pretty much. I mean, they were going to Sooner Friends were more likely going to overtake Tulane Stadium anyways, but obviously those tickets are going to go up really quickly because Tulane game, it also goes to a good cause.
Yes. I've seen several OU fans on various social media websites demanding that we wear the white uniforms at home since we are technically the road team for this game. I kind of agree with the idea. It is kind of neat seeing the home whites, which is something that only LSU and Georgia Tech do as far as I'm concerned. So I think it would be kind of neat to see. What do you think about that?
I'd be pretty cool. It's kind of interesting though. Not really much. I really don't have much to say on that. But since they are technically the away team, I think they should. But obviously, that's up to what Tulane and OU decide to do.
Exactly. Now, moving aside from that game, jumping real quickly on our news here, we have some breaking news today that came out of the NFL that I honestly did not expect to see today. I was shocked when this happened a few hours ago. Cam Newton has been cut from the New England Patriots.
I'm actually not as shocked. The only thing I'm really shocked is that they actually cut him. The thing was, I wasn't expecting him to actually be the starter, but you have an issue where Cam wants to be the starter, and isn't really willing to be a backup, despite the fact he hasn't been the same player since 2015, since that miraculous MVP run he had. And he just never been the same since. But supposedly the Dallas Cowboys are looking at to add him as a backup, but it's up to Cam whether he wants to either continue being in the NFL getting paid or remain a free agent by demanding he'd be a starter.
And we have that here per Jordan Schultz. The Cowboys are going to begin exploring Cam Newton as a potential backup to Dak Prescott. But Dallas cut two quarterbacks today in Garrett Gilbert and Ben DiNucci. The only backup the Cowboys have is Cooper Rush, who just has one career completion. So if I'm Dallas, you need to find somebody fast.
You really need to, Ben DiNucci. I'm fine with that. That's perfect. That's the right thing to cut him, as he really was not that great. But getting rid of Gilbert, you lose a decent quarterback, I should say. I don't really know how to properly say. I mean, Gilbert wasn't that great, but he did well enough last year as a backup to Andy Dalton to at least be effective, because he showed some shines where he can play, just obviously not good enough to get the win.
Mm-hmm. And another thing, per a source from Pro Football Talk, the Patriots did not try to trade Cam Newton before deciding to cut him, which I find kind of interesting. I would think someone would want Cam Newton, but I guess the Patriots decided they didn't want to try to trade him.
I don't think there's really much any market value for him. I mean, yes, for granted, Dallas probably would have been like, hey, we'll take him, because you obviously need backups now. I mean, but that's obviously before we found out that both Gilbert and Danucci got cut.
Yeah.
But the thing is like Cam Newton's only on a 1-year offer for like, I don't know, like 8 million, because obviously Cam Newton wanting more money. I don't know the exact amounts, but it's really, I think they just like, just hurry up and cut our losses and not have to worry about trying to find him a new home and get something. Because there's really not, besides probably getting late round picks or maybe another couple of scrubs or whatever, you really don't have much to work with Cam.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I mean, you have to be desperate for a backup quarterback to want Cam. And the problem is I don't think Cam will be willing to accept that unless Cam just wants to be in the NFL.
I would think maybe you'd have some sort of package you could run with him, maybe as you see certain NFL teams do, they'll have like a running quarterback package or something like that. I think something like that could work.
I mean, yeah, because even despite obviously him having his shoulder problems, he was still an effective runner for the Pats last year.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever he got to play, he couldn't really throw. That was his biggest problem.
Yeah.
I mean, he only threw like 8 touchdowns and had 10 interceptions or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It weren't very high numbers for passing, but he scored a lot on the ground.
However, this now sets up Mac Jones as the starter of the Patriots, as I assume they were really impressed with him. Why else would he be the starter?
He was out, according to reports from New England and other ones in the media. Mac Jones was just outplaying him in a lot of aspects. They tried to. I think they did say that they both were pretty much even in practice. I think just in the preseason, Max Jones just proved that he was really good.
And then this is something that, while we were setting our show up today, this is actually something that has come in. Albert Breer reporting that the Patriots have also released backup quarterback Brian Hoyer. So another backup quarterback gone for the Patriots. So it really is Mac Jones' time to shine.
I mean, either it's time to put up or shut up.
Exactly. Now, speaking of putting up or shutting up, week 1 for the Patriots is going to be very fun if you're a fan of Alabama, as you'll get to see Mac Jones versus Tua Tagovailoa in a quarterback battle that I think will be really entertaining to watch.
Oh, most definitely, because obviously with Tua being his few years at Alabama, obviously proved to be one of the best quarterbacks they've had there after, really in a while, though Jalen Hurts was a good quarterback, was a relatively good quarterback. He was more of a run first. I would say more run first. Yeah, he could throw the deep ball, but people didn't look at him as the big threat like they looked at Tua and Mac Jones, because Tua, while he can run, was more of a pocket passer. He could just throw that ball like it was nothing.
Yes.
But his issue was that he struggled to stay healthy in the last year he was there. And then obviously Mac Jones, for his first year as a starter, which is the COVID year, just them and Alabama just dominate. No one could beat them. Mac Jones, Heisman finalist, more willing deserved, but I thought he would have been the one to win it, but they gave it to Devontae Smith.
Yes, and he definitely had an impressive.
Oh, most definitely.
When you're able to have a quarterback and wide receiver duo in the top 5 for the Heisman, that is truly something special there.
Most definitely.
Now, not to get too ahead of ourselves looking ahead to week 1, we do have some news involving the Texans and Deshaun Watson. Per Ian Rappaport, the Texans are not expected to trade Deshaun Watson. We did not see anything happen at the 4 p.m. cut-down deadline today. And so, unless something happened that we're not aware of, which I highly doubt, Houston is going to keep him into the regular season.
I don't see, that he has too much baggage on him. I mean, with all the accusations that surround him, why would you can't, no team's going to want to touch that, because even if he does go to another team and he plays, you're still going to have to deal with the sports media talking about those things that he did with those women. He's actually having actual lawsuits, not civil cases. Some of them are actually, I mean, the FBI is getting involved in it. So these are obviously very serious things, and And obviously because he doesn't want to be in Houston, the way he's acted throughout training camp, even through the preseason, it's like I wouldn't play him, and you can't cut him because you paid him a crap ton of money.
And that's also something I've seen, that when the Texans came out with their roster, they actually had Watson in the quarterback 4 slot, meaning he was at the bottom of the depth chart for quarterbacks.
I mean, when you throw maybe 1 or 2 passes a day, or even not at all, and he's being uncooperative and has basically been very public against your organization, why play him? And he's also, in my opinion, I'm surprised other players, I haven't really seen much, but it doesn't seem like other players are really talking about his behavior. It's just not acceptable. I mean, I get you don't want to be there, but players who don't want to be with teams they've been with at least still play for the most part. Most of them do, but they work their butts off. I mean, many players in like the Jacksonville run after 2017, it became a toxic environment because due to a lot of other aspects, but they still kept playing, even though a lot of them didn't want to play.
Never forget, Blake Bortles was very close to a Super Bowl. Just let that sink in. Just let that sink in, everybody.
Yep.
Now, speaking of kind of jokes, not saying Blake Bortles is a joke, but
he kind of is.
The Lions today made quite possibly the most stunning move of the day. I don't know how the Lions did this, but they somehow released both of their kickers, both Randy Bullock and Zane Gonzalez. So there are no kickers on the Detroit Lions roster. There are no kickers. I do not understand this.
I mean, this is Detroit we're talking about.
Are we going for it on 4th down every time in Detroit? I honestly have no idea.
Just get Jared Goff to just kick it every time.
Yeah, so are we going to have a punter kick? What are we doing if we're Detroit?
Just do a drop kick.
I really don't understand. This isn't Canadian football where you only have 3 downs. I don't know if that's what they're thinking.
Maybe. I think Detroit's transitioning to be a CFL team.
I mean,
they'd actually win games.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they could beat Toronto maybe some years or something, beat the Argonauts, but I honestly do not know what the Lions are doing. However, I do know what we are doing, which is we're going to transition from the NFL really quick. We're going to step out of football for a moment to talk NBA, finishing up our news cycle for the day. In that Ben Simmons does not show up to the start of training camp today for the 76ers. We've already heard the trade rumors. We've heard so much about where he might go, who he might get traded for. No one really knows what's happening in that situation, and I really want to hear what you think about it.
With everything that's been going down after they got eliminated in the playoffs, Ben Simmons getting on a max contract, scores almost no points in the 4th quarter for I don't know how many games straight, and also does barely either doesn't get double-digit points or is barely doing anything. He passed up easy baskets or even fouls because he's afraid to do a free throw.
Exactly.
And it doesn't, when you have a player who cannot do a jump shot that great. He keeps talking. I know, they keep talking about, I'm going to work on my game to get better and everything. He has yet to show he's worthy of his max contract. He can score down low, but that's it.
No.
And even then, this last season, he's basically just proved that he cannot handle playoff basketball. Joel Embiid can't carry that team forever. They don't have other shooters to rely on, and the fact you have a guy who's scared to score, you got to get away. You have to get rid of him. But my issue is there are teams that will take Ben Simmons from them, but 76ers are asking way, way too much for. They're asking for several first-round picks and then other or whatever. And I'm like, those don't equate to any. You're asking way too much. People aren't going to take him off of you. That would free up a lot of cap space by asking for a crap 3 or 4 picks.
Yes.
You can't do that.
And that's something that I think is kind of a dilemma that Philadelphia has gotten themselves into.
Trust
is
the
that
process.
that process is broken over there. I'm sorry, but when you have just an absolutely ludicrous asking price of give us give us a superstar for Ben Simmons, in what world did they really think? Did they really think like Portland was going to bite on that? Did they really think Damian Lillard was going to be traded for Ben Simmons? Why? I don't know what they were trying to prove to themselves there. Honestly, I just don't know.
It's Philadelphia. That's they they don't know what they're trying to equate. They're trying to equal that asking price, but it's either hurt yourself on cap or you have to just ride him out.
Now, one name I keep hearing with Ben Simmons talks is the Timberwolves. That's a team I keep hearing. And I think that honestly could be a good fit. But the only question is, who do you give up for Ben Simmons? Because obviously they're not going to want to trade D'Angelo Russell.
No.
You're not going to want to give away Karl Anthony Towns.
No.
You're not going to want to give away
big.
Anthony Edwards.
No.
So do you go the route that we've seen of so many super teams now where you trade most of your depth to bring in a star player and then pray that they don't get injured? Because if they do, you have a situation like we saw with the Lakers in the playoffs this year.
Yep.
As much as it was fun seeing the Lakers lose, it was kind of disappointing to see them get beat not at 100%.
Well, it's really that thing is this is the problem that the Lakers have been dealing with. I mean, you can consider like their title run to that bubble playoff. They got lucky that there was that little break in between. Obviously, with COVID hitting, they were able to heal up and actually go all the way. But the fact that they can't get through the season and through the playoffs without dealing with problems, I mean, they're dealing with the same problems that other teams were dealing with. Just the issue is it hit Anthony Davis harder because he can't stay healthy. And LeBron, in my opinion, is just using excuses for why he can't succeed on his own. Not necessarily on his own, but the fact he can't push through and try to win. I mean, it really says a lot when you quit on your team in Game 6 when you're getting beat. Mm-hmm. It speaks volumes on him as a player and just the way he thinks about the team. Now, for granted, yes, they went out and got Westbrook, but at what cost? They lost a lot of their bench. I mean, they got rid of 3 players to get Russell. They're getting a washed up Carmelo Anthony, and then they actually re-signed Rajon Rondo for a 1-year deal, but they also lost some other a few other players that would have more likely would have been added some depth, but now they're probably only be able to run maybe 6-7 players deep.
Yeah, and that is personally one problem I have with the whole super team trend in the NBA is that you're essentially sacrificing almost all depth you have just to have 3 or 4 star players, which can pay off if they all stay healthy, absolutely. But if even 1 or 2 of them goes down and you're having to bring someone in who hasn't played that much all year, has been in a very limited role or almost more of a mentor role, then you're suddenly in a world of hurt.
I mean, look at what happened to the Nets.
Exactly.
They spent that whole year, like they obviously had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving for a year or two, or whenever they signed.
Yes.
And then Harden proceeds to somehow get himself out of Houston to join them, and they bring Blake Griffin on, who, well, Blake Griffin is not in his prime years, but he can still play. You just got to give him some people to work with. I mean, that's with any great player. You got to give him some players to work with, but you have four all-star players, whether they were current or former all-stars. I mean, Blake Griffin, I don't think he'll ever go to another all-star, but he's still can play. But the thing is, almost everyone went down. I mean, Kyrie Irving went down. Harden was nagging on a leg injury that prevented him from really playing as much. I mean, you can't win with KD. KD can't do everything, and you have a bunch of role guys that are leagues behind your main players.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's why Milwaukee somehow got past them, and also they got lucky that Durant foot was on the line.
Yes,
but Milwaukee is not a super team. They don't. I mean, you have Giannis and Middleton, and then you have Brook Lopez, but Brook Lopez is not the same player as he was years ago, but he can still play as well.
And don't forget Drew Holiday as well, who, despite having some very, very bad games, always brought intensity on defense, which is something you absolutely have to have to win. And then Bobby Portis, just what a spark plug off the bench he was to have.
Oh, most definitely. But that was one of the teams that was like, I'm rooting for, like, I want to see Milwaukee get to the final. They were a team that I definitely deserved their championship.
And I think this was a more enjoyable NBA playoff season in that it was so off-putting to see no one there that we knew. We have the Bucks, we have the Hawks doing well, we have the Clippers doing well, the Suns doing well. These are teams that have not been, for some, relevant for over a decade, maybe more.
For the Clippers, this is like the last couple of years. I mean, yes, you had Blake Griffin and Chris Paul play together the whole Lob City era, but they couldn't get past the second round. So, but no one viewed them really as relevant. But you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George.
Yes.
There, and obviously you have all those other players that they can make a run. That was technically, like, I wouldn't even call them a super. I know you have two superstars on that team, but they don't make up a super team because you have backup players that can play just as well, that can step up when you need them to in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
But you have the Bucks were not relevant for, like, relevant obviously as title contenders. They've been good here and there, like before the 21st century, but for the most part, they were not a team that really cared for or really watched until the Bucks, obviously, when they got Giannis and had Middleton with them, they slowly got better and better. And obviously, they're the team, and you just had so many players that just worked out well.
Exactly.
And then obviously the Suns haven't been relevant since
really 2010. They had an almost entire decade where they were dormant.
They were doormats for ever since. Let's see. Who was the point? I forget point guard's name.
You just got Steve Nash.
Steve
Nash, Amari Stoudemire. They had so many fun players to watch.
Yeah, the last time they were relevant was when Steve Nash, because they were always that team that, like, you got to watch out for.
Exactly. That 7-second offense was very killer.
Very.
It was very hard to stop.
But obviously with Chris Paul coming in, you have Booker.
Yeah, Devin Booker.
And then you just have and then
DeAndre Ayton, who had an absolutely fantastic playoff season.
Oh, most definitely. That was that's probably one of the most dominant playoff runs by a big guy since Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, you usually do not see centers as the one to step up in the playoffs, but absolutely thrilled to see, someone that you don't expect show up. It happens every playoff season, but usually it's a point guard or a shooting guard getting hot, maybe even a small forward, but almost never a center. So I was very excited to see that happen.
And I'm hoping to see more from Atlanta next year.
I am too.
I was so happy when they knocked off the 76ers.
It was
that was great.
Especially being an Oklahoma fan, seeing Trae Young being able to just go on the road to Madison Square Garden and into Philadelphia, where those are very heated atmospheres at times, and to be able to win there, just absolutely incredible to see him do that.
Oh, most definitely. You have a bit of a villain for those teams.
Yes.
But
Villain to the Northeast and hero to everyone else.
He was the hero we needed.
Yes.
For those teams, because I always like seeing Philadelphia and New York fans be a little sad.
Yeah, I mean, for New York fans, it's almost a tradition at this point.
I mean, if you're a Knicks fan,
you have the Knicks, you have the Giants, you have the Jets, you have the Mets.
All Mets.
You
All you
have-
have is the Yankees.
All they have is the Yankees. The Islanders, though.
The Islanders had a great run.
The Islanders had a good run. The Rangers this year had, how would you describe it? Not really issues per se, but they were just kind of trapped in a division with a lot of good teams.
I mean, that the division they're in is probably the hardest division to get out of. You already have to deal with Capitals.
Yeah, you've got, I mean, when you're dealing with the Capitals and the Islanders and the Penguins and the Bruins, and you've got all these fun teams to deal with that most teams do not want a piece of in hockey.
Nope.
Having to know one of those five is not going to make it out was very intriguing to watch. Now, thankfully, we'll be back to our normal division, so we'll have a bit more balance this upcoming NHL season.
Oh, most definitely.
But we have talked about basketball and hockey for a bit longer than I thought we would.
It kind of just rolled in together with one topic.
It did. So I say quickly, but it more than likely will not be quickly. Let's go back to week 0 of college football and kind of recap a bit of what happened here. We're going to save the main story for last because that's the one that we'll probably take the longest on. So let's start with Hawaii and UCLA. That is a game that I am not going to lie, most people probably forgot even happened.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even know that game was actually going on.
Yeah, it was. Well, there's a reason for that. UCLA jumps up 17-0, 6 minutes left in the first quarter. Zach Charbonnet has an amazing game with 3 touchdowns for the Bruins, forcing turnovers as well on the defensive end. Hawaii had some flashes of great play, but it was really just UCLA's game, and no one was stopped. I mean, going back to Zach Charbonnet, when you have 3 touchdowns and 100 yards on 6 carries, 6, that's 1 out of every 2 is a touchdown, is absolutely insane to think about.
Yeah.
And with UCLA getting LSU at home next week, I am excited to see what UCLA does.
I'm not. We'll also get to see how LSU is because obviously after they lost so much talent after that 2019 season, it really showed because the record really showed they were not that great.
No.
But you still had a couple players that were on that were from that squad that were still really good. Obviously, some of them also got drafted this last time.
Yes. And so LSU they still had some quality wins too. I mean, yes, you have losses like to Mississippi State, which are very disappointing, but being able to still go into the swamp and beat Florida.
That is true.
Now, granted, that was more someone throwing a shoe than anything else.
Florida cost themselves that game.
LSU was just along for the ride.
Yeah.
But they were still, the fact that they were hanging with them enough that was able to change the game really shows that LSU was still having some moments of greatness in there. And so the next game I want to bring up is one that actually more people watched than UCLA and Hawaii, but was not an FBS game per se. Now, I had a lot of fun watching this game that most people, once again, probably did not even know it was on unless you watched College Game Day that morning. And that was the SWAC MEAC Challenge, the HBCU's historically black colleges and universities, North Carolina Central and Alcorn State. Just to show you a little bit, we got, 15,000 people for a game like this. That's absolutely great to see. You got Battle of the Bands, which is always fantastic to see with HBCU bands.
They're the best bands to watch.
Yeah, Alcorn State was able to win the Battle of the Bands in my personal opinion, but they did not win the game. It was a huge upset. North Carolina Central winning 23-14. Alcorn State was heavy favorites going into this game. They scored their first drive of the game. It looked like it was going to be absolute dominance by the Braves, but North Carolina Central after getting outplayed for almost the entire first half, was able to just slowly chip away, tie the game right before halftime, come out and score to start the third quarter. Now, they did miss a PAT to make it 13-7 in the third quarter. Alcorn State scores. It looks like we've got a great defensive battle. And then North Carolina Central puts it away with 9 quick points in about 3 minutes to start the fourth quarter. And it was on a punt return, too. It was a beautiful 77-yard punt return by Brandon Codrington. And so that was just absolutely amazing football to watch. And that's something that I think does not get the respect it deserves as HBCU football.
No, they don't.
Because there's a lot of passion there. And the school sizes, you would think being FCS would be small, but they're bigger than some FBS schools.
Oh, yeah, most definitely, because of their backgrounds, and also at one time some of these schools were actually on the levels of some of the D1s right now.
Yes.
In the past, but those schools have they've gotten bigger, and they're attractable to a lot of areas, and there's a lot of passion for those universities.
Yes, and now the game of the day that most people watched, Brett Bielema returns to college football as a head coach with Illinois, taking on Nebraska. And I'm not going to lie, this was a very enjoyable game to watch for me. Illinois beating Nebraska 30-22. I honestly did not know what we were watching half the time. I don't know if you could call it football. It definitely was played on a football field, but I really do not understand some of the things that just happened in this game. And Scott Frost came out and said it. He said the way they lined up the first drive of the game took away over half of our game plan we had prepared for. And to me, I don't know if he's trying to that almost sounds like you're trying to get fired at this point. I honestly do not know what is going on at Nebraska.
It's not, how many years has he been there?
This is his 4th season.
And you're 4 years in. Obviously, he came from UCF where he led that undefeated team.
Yes.
National champions. Not really. But you come in back to your alma mater, but yet you're unable to really do anything, despite the fact the reputation you have as a coach. And currently they're also dealing with NCAA violations that they're being accused of.
One thing I really do not understand. Imagine cheating potentially, keep in mind potentially, to win 12 games in 3 years. How do you even do that?
As far as I know, the violations that they were being accused of, according to one of the ESPN articles I read, it was basically it was a lot of stuff that happened during the COVID season. They were doing things they were doing some things that they were not, that the NCAA banned for that season. They were doing their workouts off campus. That way they could do more stuff so they wouldn't be supervised. That's supposedly what's being accused of, though there's no evidence to really prove anything as of right now. But in my opinion, I hope the Cornhuskers suck forever because they deserve it.
Now, personally, another thing here is that Scott Frost and Nebraska at one point in time tried to get out of the Nebraska-Oklahoma game this year. And that is something that, as an Oklahoma fan, I was not really a fan of. I was surprised that they would try to get out of a game representing the 50th anniversary of the 1971 game of the century when OU Nebraska met as 1-2. It was a very important game in college football history. And the fact that they tried to get out of that game to go schedule some lower level school that's just kind of hurtful to think like.
You gotta pad your wins.
To think they're trying to pad their wins that's not how you build the brand at Nebraska. Nebraska already has a brand. And you build a brand, at least in my opinion, for FBS schools at least. You go out and play the big name teams. You go out and challenge an Oklahoma, an Ohio State, Wisconsin, a Penn State, a Michigan State even. But to just kind of cower away from Oklahoma like that so you can go schedule I don't know who is just really sad to me. And then to add on top of that, this is year 4 for Scott Frost, like we said. Their offense has gotten worse every single year under him. It has not improved at all. Adrian Martinez would have flashes of good plays where he'd make a great read, a great throw, or a great run, and then he'd follow it up by overthrowing a guy by 10 feet or underthrowing a guy by 15 feet.
That comes down to how you're developing your quarterback and the quarterback himself, and that falls on to the offensive coordinator and Scott Frost. You have to make it when your quarterback is not performing as well. And the thing is, when you're having to stick with him and he's not being consistent, it's gonna, and you have nothing behind him that is even somewhat consistent. You're screwed, and they're not getting players. Their players are not developing. I don't know where they are in the recruiting class.
I do not know off the top of my head where they are recruiting either. But I kind of want to take you through this game just to recap some of the oddities and really just simple sounding things that just did not go Nebraska's way. You start the game, the first score of the game, keep in mind the first points of the college football season were a safety where the Nebraska player catches the ball, momentum carries him into the end zone from the 2-yard line to the end zone. He then tries to throw the ball forward as he's being tackled in the end zone. His knee was already down before he threw the ball forward. And that's one of your captains of the team that we were talking about on the Fox broadcast. That was one of the leaders of the team. And if the leader of the team is making simple mistakes like that, I honestly don't know how you can go forward with this. I honestly don't know. They may not beat Buffalo even. They really may not. That game is at Buffalo.
Way I see it, Nebraska's looking if they win four or 5 games. Maybe not, if even that.
They really might be.
I mean, when you're playing, Illinois is not really that great of a football team.
No, they're not known for football.
The only great thing that ever has come out of their program was when they upset Wisconsin for their homecoming.
And then don't forget the 2007 season that everyone remembers very well for being just quite possibly one of the most random years of college football, with Juice Williams just being able to run all over Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Now, kind of continuing to take you through this game here, after that safety, it really looked like Nebraska was in a very bad situation, but they were able to shake it off. Illinois' quarterback goes down, Brandon Peters. It looked very serious. However, Brett Bielema today actually did say, if I can find the exact quote here, there we go. Brandon Peters' injury does not appear to be season-ending. That is great to hear that it is not going to be a season-ending injury. I thought it was from the way it looked. I'm just happy it is not. But Nebraska looked like they got their act together. They get a nice touchdown to start the second quarter, and then they miss the extra point.
Lol.
And then the kicker redeems himself. He makes a 27-yard field goal. It's 9-2. It looks like Nebraska, all they have to do is kind of stay in control here. Defense was playing well. In comes Arthur Sitkowski, who was a transfer from Rutgers. He threw 20 interceptions at Rutgers. 8 touchdowns to 20 interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And he proceeds to, I don't know what he did, but he looked very impressive. He looked a lot better than he did at Rutgers. I don't know what happened in the offseason, but I mean, just good for him. Good to see him play well.
Probably good change in environment, and the system works for him.
Yeah. And Illinois was able to go on what I consider a classic Big Ten football drive. 6 minutes, 24 seconds, 11 plays. They tie the game at 9 on a touchdown run for Mike Epstein. And then Nebraska turns the ball over. A fumble for Calvin Hart Jr., 41-yard fumble return. And to me, when that happened, you felt all the momentum shift in Illinois' favor. 16-9 Illini going into the half. And then they get the ball to start the second half. Another great drive of 8 minutes. That completely just sucks the life out of a team.
That's Big Ten football.
That's Big Ten football at its finest. 23-9. But Illinois was not done yet. They pour another one on. But Sitkowski throwing another touchdown pass, this time to Isaiah Williams, who was a quarterback that got converted to wide receiver. So a quarterback-to-quarterback throw in a way to make it 30-9. And then out of nowhere, here comes Nebraska. Adrian Martinez gets a nice run. I think Illinois was trying to kind of play more like a man. Martinez sees that, runs right through the O-line and goes 75 yards to the house, makes it 30-16. And then Illinois just kind of tried to sit on the ball a bit for the rest of the game. And it ended up working, but it nearly cost them at the end. Nebraska goes down, scores. They took a bit too long, though, I think, trying to score because it was just like, okay, Nebraska needs a 2-minute drive, and instead they take 6:42. And then to top that off, they miss the extra point again. It's 30-22.
So even if they score, they have to go for 2.
They would have to go for 2. So that's 4 points that special teams messed up. That's 2 missed extra points and that awkward safety.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, you look at that, that's 28-24 instead.
Yeah.
And that looks a bit more reasonable. That's still a loss.
It's still a loss.
There's no real moral victory to take away from that. But that's just, to think about it, that's 4 more points you could have had. That's 4 more points.
How much was Nebraska favored to win this game?
Actually, let me see if we have that. Nebraska was a 6.5-point favorite. The over-under for this game was 53. We hit 52, so apologies if you bet the over. We just missed it. You probably are very unhappy at Nebraska special teams for that. But, I mean, it was just so great to have college football back. The game was supposed to be played in Dublin, Ireland. Obviously, COVID-19 going on. That was not going to happen. Instead, it got moved.
Not gonna lie, I'm glad that game didn't get played there because that would have been pretty bad.
I think they would have liked it. Everyone needs to see one of those weirder college football games once in a while.
That's true. I guess you can be right about that.
Yeah. And so that was the main game that most people watched. 3 million people tuned in to watch this game. Wow. This was the main game of the day that everyone who wanted to watch college football ended up seeing.
That's probably the most Illinois ever gets.
Yeah, it's probably one of their better, well, unless they play in Ohio State or something like that.
If it's not a big team. Like Nebraska, yes, they have their, obviously their fan base is very loyal, but the fact that they still get 3 million total viewers is actually impressive.
I'm just going to want to take you through Illinois' season here, the first half at least, because to me, this is a team that most people do not think about as being great, but I really want you to think about this upcoming slate they have. So you defeat Nebraska, you then get UTSA at home, Texas San Antonio next week, then you go to Virginia, you get Maryland at home, you go to Purdue, and then you get Charlotte at home. They could be 6-0 with Wisconsin coming to town.
Also, this depends on how Virginia is, though I'm not thinking they're going to be great.
Yeah, I'm not expecting
the chances that Illinois could actually go 6-0 is astonishing. I mean, they should beat UTSA.
I would think.
That's why I'm saying you should. You more likely should beat Virginia, but this depends on how good how good Virginia actually might be. Maryland hasn't been good in a while, but I don't know how they are.
Yeah, Maryland is always one of those teams that they stay around middle of the pack. Some years they're worse than others, but they're always, and same with Purdue and Virginia. That's why I think if Illinois, those are some of those, if you can just get balls to go the right way, get some kicks to go, maybe, or something special happens, you really can be undefeated with Wisconsin coming to town. And just imagine that scenario, Brett Bielema going up against a team he coached with quite possibly the Big Ten West on the line. Because you look later on in the season at Penn State, Rutgers, at Minnesota, at Iowa, Northwestern at home. It obviously, the second half is a lot more difficult than the first half.
Oh, yeah, way tougher.
You add 3 ranked teams into the mix, and Northwestern is never a easy game by any means necessary. Neither is Minnesota, and even Rutgers. Rutgers might be decent this year.
Oh yeah, because after last season, they showed forms of actually being competitive, which was very shocking because they're usually the bottom feeders. They're like the Kansas of the Big Ten, usually. I mean, ever since they came in.
Yeah, ever since they've moved.
But the fact that last year that they actually played relatively well is a very refreshing change because there was like a few years when they were in the Big East, they actually were good. They were ranked, but so it's going to be very interesting to see what Rutgers will do, and we'll see how Illinois will. I'm hoping they can at least make a bowl game.
I'm hoping to see it too. I think it would be a really fun and a really neat storyline of Brett Bielema a few years off coaching in college football to be able to come back, still kind of run that same type of offense that he used to do at Wisconsin. Obviously, Melvin Gordon is not walking through that door to carry Illinois, but it would be very fun, I think. It's always fun to see teams that are not the best at winning college football games, that don't have the best tradition of it, to see them do well, like we saw with Indiana last year.
Oh, most definitely, and I hope to see more from Indiana this year. I just wish they would have beaten Ohio State. So, because the one thing that really irks me, yes, the Big Ten initially wasn't going to play. Then they came back. They eventually about halfway through the year, they was like, all right, we're going to play, and they kept extending. They kept doing whatever it took to make sure Ohio State made it to the Big Ten title game by constantly changing they said you had like how many? It was like six wins or whatever.
Yeah, I believe 6-0.
Originally it was 6, but Ohio State wasn't going to get 6 wins because they were not able to play
Michigan at the end of the year.
Well, it wasn't just Michigan. There was a couple.
I believe there were some other games in there, but
there was at least like 1 or 2 more.
The main one I could think of was the Michigan game because it was the first time Jim Harbaugh did not lose to Ohio State.
But they kept changing the goal line because Indiana should have gone, because Indiana played all their teams.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State didn't, yet Ohio State was still, the Big Ten made sure Ohio State could get it. Now, for granted, Ohio State, yes, they beat Northwestern pretty good, and then they went on to go to the championship game. Obviously got rolled by Alabama, but
I mean, Ohio State was still a very good team.
Oh yeah, they were very. I'm not saying that
we
they
got
weren't.
to see what they did to Clemson. Yeah, and I know you're not saying they weren't, but it was just interesting to see how things can change when certain teams are involved.
Oh, most definitely.
And I know, being an OU fan, we get the benefit of the doubt as well. But it's one of those, it is always fun to see how rules can magically be changed after being strict the entire year.
Also, one thing I am curious about with this involves, like, obviously the penalty rule at Texas. Are they still going to keep that horns down thing on the way to the SEC? Because that was mainly a rule for the Big 12.
Now, the SEC, I think, will be different in that none of them care about Texas. There is no tie to them unless you're Texas A&M or Oklahoma or maybe Arkansas and Missouri.
It's basically anyone that was from the Big 12 or from the Southwest Conference.
Yeah, you're walking into an environment where most teams do not care about your existence, but the ones that do care do not like you.
That's pretty much.
I mean,
how it
even
is.
listening to some of the Paul Feinbaum show a few times, because, being an SEC member in a few years, I get to do that now. So hearing some and seeing some call-ins from Arkansas fans, especially, who were informing Paul about what the University of Texas actually does and how they cheat and do, which is it's
kind of a bit rich, but all right.
I mean, you can do anything if you have money, and that Arkansas does have money thanks to one Jerry Jones. So,
well, I meant even before, like, they both were doing the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
So they just don't want to admit that they also did it.
Well, that's the old Southwest Conference days for you. They're all cheating. It's just don't get caught. Unless you're SMU, in which case you get caught, continue to do it anyways, and get caught a second time.
I mean, that was death blow to their football program, and they were never good until last year.
And speaking of SMU, I believe Tanner Mordecai was named the starter a few days ago for SMU. So, Oakland, and then with Austin Kendall being named the starter of Louisiana Tech, yes, Austin Kendall is still in college football.
Somehow.
Yes, he just keeps bouncing around. So Oklahoma will technically have 3 starting quarterbacks in college football that at one point were at Oklahoma, and 3 starting quarterbacks in the NFL with Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts. However, with the Eagles getting Gardner Minshew, I really don't understand that move there.
No, it feels like it was more or less a move that Jacksonville was trying to get rid of Minshew.
Yeah.
Because Minshew obviously wants the starting job. I mean, but for granted, he didn't have much to work with the time he was in Jacksonville, because obviously that team was bare bones. Did he play well? It really depended.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were times sorry.
Oh no, you can go ahead.
There was like times where he Minshew played great. I mean, obviously he has that porn stash thing going, but still, it's like Minshew could play good, but it also depended on the team they played. If they usually was against good teams, he didn't play well. If it was against teams on their level or worse, he played well, but he was not consistent. And last year, he couldn't really do anything. He didn't really do much.
Yeah, it just was kind of interesting to see the few games where he did play well, and you'd start to see the hype machine beginning to roll for him,
Yep.
and then you have to run into good teams, and then he starts playing worse, which, I mean, when you're playing good teams, that's going to happen. That's just how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the hype machine immediately, everyone turns on him, is like, oh, maybe not.
It also doesn't help that Jacksonville on purposely tanked for
Trevor Lawrence. And Tim Tebow. They got Tim Tebow back. Then they cut him.
Well,
That was a fun story of the offseason.
The thing was, many were shocked that Tim Tebow even made it out of training camp.
Yeah.
But obviously, when he actually had to block on the field, it didn't amount to much.
Which is really sad, because I really wanted to see a random package that Urban Meyer could cook up to have Tim Tebow just get to throw a pass or two.
Oh, it's great for if he actually made it through the preseason to the regular season. It would be very great for the NFL, because more money comes in because people like Tebow.
Yeah.
I mean, for granted, obviously he's in Jacksonville, so Florida's gonna love him.
Yeah, you're already in that Florida area anyway.
But, I mean, like, they put his jersey when they said, "Oh, we're gonna sign him and see how it works."
Mm-hmm.
He was the #1 selling jersey.
Yeah.
Right out the gate.
I think that just goes to show kind of the power he still has. You know, it's been a decade, really, since we've seen him do anything.
I will say the thing that hurt him, obviously, was that he wasn't willing to convert to another position. If he would have converted to try to be like a tight end or maybe a fullback or any other thing, he'd still be in the NFL.
Well, you know where he should have been converted. Should have been converted to quarterback.
I will say the one thing that was disappointing with Tebow was that he never truly lost out on the field. Like, after that, obviously, yes, they lost. They somehow had that run where they went 8-8, made the playoffs barely, beat the Steelers, and then obviously you get slapped by clapped by New England. But
that's how life worked back then in the AFC. You win, and you hope you don't have to play New England, and then you play New England, and you either win and go to the Super Bowl or you lose. That was just how that cycle worked in the early 2010s.
Pretty much. But anyways,
okay. Moving back from Tim Tebow talk to college football again, I kind of have the top 25 up here and kind of run down a little bit of a preview, I guess we could say, for each team. Starting, of course, with Alabama. Alabama is going to be Alabama. They play Miami week 1. I think this will be a fun matchup for all of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we'll see Alabama start to do what Alabama does. De'Aaron King's a very talented player. I've seen him play before in person. He's very talented, great athlete. But you can't beat Alabama with one good player.
No, and
you can't beat Alabama with 2 good players or 3 good players. You have to have 11 good players at all times.
They also lost a few players to the draft that were scattered throughout. But OSU obviously playing them in the bowl game last year.
OSU jumped on them really, really quickly. Now, granted, people will say, well, they just played back. They played some backup. So I'm like, even then, it's like OSU's not playing with every starter out there. But it's
Yeah,
just
I
like,
remember.
because obviously other stuff's going on. But it's like rolls them, and then obviously Derek can show some flashes. But just like really, there's not really much to roll. I just don't see Miami actually doing anything. I think Alabama will just blow them out right from the get go.
Yeah, I could easily see this turning it. This will be a game that ABC tries to hype up as like, hey, look, this is a team that might defeat Alabama. And then it'll quickly turn into, hey, maybe they can keep it within 10, 20, maybe even 30. Maybe, I'm not going to say 40 because I think by that point the backups would be in.
Oh yeah,
But it will be very interesting to see. Kind of just name your score if you're Alabama.
Miami needs to get a defense if they want to actually be able to at least be competable with them.
Yes, and that kind of reminds me. That's how Miami is built. It's so weird seeing a Miami team that is mainly offense. Usually when I think of Miami teams, I think of stout defenses to go with it.
Oh, you that's all you usually think about. You don't really think much about.
Yeah, when you think about the U, that's at least for me the first thing I think of.
Yep, and you have some of the greatest players in college football and some on the NFL level from the U that were defensive players. You don't really hear anything from the offense.
Yeah. But speaking of offense, Alabama, man, once again, I mean, changing the guard again at quarterback to Bryce Young, who some will mention that he's very inexperienced at quarterback. He doesn't have that many reps, and yes, he does. I think Alabama, we might see that first drive or two struggle a bit.
Probably more likely just to get iron out the kinks.
Yeah, just to kind of, I mean, and I think you'll see this in every game. You usually do every year. There are some games where Oklahoma's done that against Utah State and Air Force that are, what are we doing here? Well, it's the first drives of the year. No one knows what, you know what's going on, but you're still adjusting to playing now instead of just going through practice.
Yeah, that's pretty much just how it is.
And then Alabama, once again, I think they're obviously well-deserved being number one. I don't think of any other team that could be number one, personally.
No, Alabama number one, pretty much.
And then at number two, we have Oklahoma, which we're talking about defense. If you want to talk about offense, Oklahoma will have offense. You've got Spencer Rattler coming back. You've got Marvin Mims returning at wide receiver. Austin Stogner at tight end. The offensive line's looking good.
For the most, pretty much, I think it's solid.
It's at least just needs to be solid.
No, it's like I don't see. Maybe it's like the only bad thing that could happen is Rattler might have a brain fart, or just some bad play calling. But other than that, it's like I don't see OU struggling hardly at all. It's just going to come down to can their defense step up and dominate.
Yeah, and I think this will be the year where you see OU's defense. This is the first year in a long time for me where I am more excited for the defense than the offense. And, saying that with Lincoln Riley going on as the head coach, that just says something, I think, about Alex Grinch, how he has been able to change this team in just a few seasons. Just to be able to change them from a laughing stock of defense under Mike Stoops. And some of that was not Stoops' fault. A lot of it was, though, however, when you have 3rd and 1s and we're playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, I honestly do not know what we were doing there. That has easily been corrected. I've not seen that really at all under Alex Grinch. I think we will see the D-line be absolutely great this year.
I will say you actually no longer having Bookie as one of your corners now. It will actually fix a lot.
All right, here's the deal about Bookie. Bookie, great energy guy, great team player. Everyone loved him on the team. He's almost the quarterback of the defense.
Cade's rant.
However, no, we're not getting there yet.
You're doing it right now.
I'm going to keep it short because otherwise we will be here till the sun comes up tomorrow. Because Bookie, for all intents and purposes, loved him, loved having him. He would have 1 or 2 plays a game where he would either make a great play and then celebrate it a little bit too much and get flagged for it, or he would just absolutely do something that just made you scratch your head. And he'd learn from it. He wouldn't do it again, but then the next week it'd be something entirely different. I think he'll work out great for Washington. I really do. but it was just head-scratching moments at times. It reminds me of some of the other earlier OU defenses, the 2017 defense, the 2018 defense come to mind, where there were just a few moments where you just scratch your head wondering, what are we doing out there? It seems like we only have like 2 or 3 guys that know what they're doing, and the other 8 are just standing there.
Before, like, pre-2018, actually I'd say in 2018, that was every Big 12 defense. No one actually knew how to play, unless you don't count. Well, TCU always usually has a consistent defense, so you can't really say much about that. But it's mainly just every other Big 12 no one knew how to play defense. I mean, OU and Oklahoma State and Iowa State now have kind of figured it out, where they actually have talent on that side that is really dominant. I mean, obviously many players come back to do another season with Oklahoma. Other players for OSU are coming back. Iowa State literally brought back pretty much everybody.
I think Iowa State, I want to say it was like 9 or 10 starters on offense. It was ridiculous.
They pretty much brought maybe unless one. The only ones that probably didn't come back were probably a senior that was just like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But on that, it's like they brought back everyone. They brought back all their tight ends. They brought back obviously quarterback, the running back. Who was he? Was he a sophomore or junior?
I cannot remember for the life of me.
Almost Hall was. Yeah. He definitely was going to come back. I mean, that team, them and Oklahoma are the front runners. Obviously, the way people have it is that Texas is right behind them. And I'm like, Texas has to prove that they can actually play.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to Texas later on down, so let's keep on moving here before we get sidetracked even further about the Big 12. Clemson at 3, I think this, once again, the top 5 I think is pretty well done here. But Clemson, you got the fun name to pronounce that is going to throw a lot of people off this year. Just listening to announcers trying to pronounce his name will be half the fun. DJ Uiagalelei. Say that 3 times fast. He's going to be a great quarterback. We saw him in the Notre Dame game this year in South Bend.
That was a really fun game. Sadly, the Irish won, but
that was a game where I think personally no one who won that game I was going to be happy with. That was one of those where this is a great game. I really don't want either of these teams to win, but someone has to win this game.
But sadly, it had to be the Irishmen. But
I think I would rather have taken them over Clemson, though.
I disagree with that wholeheartedly, but he showed really great brilliance by replacing Trevor Lawrence for a couple weeks.
Yes,
and definitely obviously iron a couple things out. He's definitely going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation.
He absolutely will. And even the Boston College game where we saw him struggling once he was immediately kind of thrown into a role he wasn't expected to be in that week.
Mm-hmm.
You get down 28-10 and then just be able to battle your way out, the defense helping you out, getting stops finally. We were able to see him, under some pressure, make some great plays and do what he needed to do to get the win.
Yeah, I would say probably really quickly, so we'll move on. I will say one thing Clemson will need to fix is their spots on defense.
Oh yeah, that absolutely will be an issue.
Because I know they had guys that returned from the prior year, from the 2019 season, obviously, but even then, some of those players they struggled. They were worse in 2020 than they were in 2019. 2019 they were good. 2020 they struggled.
I personally think that is kind of an advantage that the Big 12 has. I know we said we were going to get off this, but I'm going to bring it back real quick, is that we are seeing more and more teams wanting to spread the field and play fast. We're seeing Clemson do it now. We've seen Alabama do it. LSU's adjusted. Everyone is adjusting to this offense that the Big 12 did in the early 2010s that everyone kind of remembered them for.
Yeah.
And everyone made fun of the Big 12. Oh, my gosh, they have no defense whatsoever. I think it was just the pace of play was so much faster.
The defenses were not ready.
The defenses were not ready. You would expect it from Texas Tech because it was kind of tradition for them to do it.
Oh, yeah.
But once everyone started doing it, except maybe Kansas and Kansas State, but that was about it.
Well, Kansas State, they were going to stick with what Bill Snyder was going to do. Oklahoma State and OU obviously took off with the spread.
Yes.
I mean, OSU, especially in 2011, I think arguably had the best spread team until I probably say the 2017 OU season.
Mm-hmm.
The 2011 squad was just, they had so many great units, and then obviously with Baker Mayfield's last year, that team was just really good.
Yes.
I mean, I think the best offenses were OU and OSU again in 17, but I think OU was better at it because they had a more consistent offense. Especially they had a better offensive coordinator, and obviously better. And I think Lincoln Riley was a little better when it came to that than Mike Gundy was.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that was killer for OSU was dealing with Mike Yurcich, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other topic I can rant on. But
And kind of continuing this tradition of the spread here, Ohio State, that's another team that does it. They're ranked number 4 here. C.J. Stroud got named as the quarterback the other day. Ohio State, though, to me, is the biggest question mark because I honestly do not know what to expect from them. Obviously, they're going to have some games where they dominate. I'm not saying that, they're going to, have a bunch of one-possession games. Not at all. But C.J. Stroud has, I think, of Bryce Young, DJ Uiagalelei, and him, he has the least experience of the 3. He still has some experience. He's played in a game or 2 last year. But their test going to Minnesota on Thursday night game in Minneapolis, where they're going to be bringing out new uniforms. They're going to be ready to rock. Fox will be there. Big kickoff game. They are going to be ready to go for that. So I think Ohio State is going to have to settle in quickly if they want to win that one.
I will say, speaking of Minnesota, I know last year they had a bit down season, but they had guys who opted out.
Yes.
Many of them are star players, so I think they'll bounce back and actually be more competitive than they were.
I think so.
But, all right, on to Georgia.
Yep, number 5 being Georgia. Georgia's another team that is really just, what can you say about Georgia at this point? It's kind of the same thing every year. They're right there, and I think 5 is the best spot that kind of puts Georgia football in such a good perspective. They're right there. They're not elite in the top 4, but they're still extremely great and very talented. They do have a few injuries right now. I can't remember off the top of my head, but 2 starters injured, I want to say. Nothing big at quarterback or running back, but I think offensive line and issues, things like that. But they get a very rough start going up against Clemson, and I think if Georgia wins that game, despite the injuries, that'll be huge, and Clemson will really be on their heels for the rest of the season in the playoff race because of how weak the ACC is, and that'll be a rant coming up for a few minutes.
Yeah, it's literally just them.
But if Clemson beats Georgia, the narrative the entire year will be, look at how great Clemson is, they beat Georgia.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, is true.
True, but they need to play more than just some cupcake teams in their division.
Yes. And number 6, Texas A&M. I don't understand Texas A&M being 6. I really don't.
They're not in my opinion, they're not a top 10 team. And personally, yes, they were great last year with how they played, but they beat everybody else. But they got smacked by Alabama.
Did.
That's how big the talent gap was.
Yes.
And A&M, I don't know who they're with right now, but
if I remember correctly, it was a freshman quarterback that's coming in. Now, will Jimbo have them ready? Absolutely. But I think it's the same year same year. My goodness, my brain is going places. Different year, same problem. You're going to have to play Alabama.
Yeah.
And until you beat Alabama, it is not going to be easy for Texas A&M. And it won't be easy even if they beat Alabama.
Yeah, because you still got to deal with some teams from the SEC East that are good, and you still got to deal with your own division, which you could get upset at any moment.
Exactly. The Mississippi's always lurking around, LSU, Arkansas. It's never a fun time in the SEC.
No.
And then at number 7, Iowa State. I think Iowa State is pretty well placed here.
It's either 7 or 8.
But my thing with Iowa State is they have to show me something. Every year they start out slow. They always lose a weird game at the beginning of the year that makes zero sense, and then by October, they look really good. And I think if they can just beat them finally.
Well, the thing is, here's the thing. Last year, Iowa State, you could say started slow, but they obviously they beat Oklahoma, and they lost a game to Oklahoma State, which, to be fair, Oklahoma State outplayed them for the most part. Iowa State kind of creeped their way to at least make it close. But then after that, Iowa State was almost unbeatable. Like they were arguably the toughest team besides Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Beat. But once again, Iowa State, if they want to prove that they belong, they have to start strong and stay strong for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that to me, that's just how I feel with Iowa. That's how I feel with a lot of Big 12 teams, to be honest, is that can they be good? Absolutely. And I'm not knocking them, but just win a big game outside of the Big 12, please.
It's literally for any team. And
yes.
Thing is, I don't think there's really anyone that's playing a tough team this year.
I mean,
outside their conference.
Yeah. And then Cincinnati here at 8. Cincinnati will be a good team. Now, they're a team that I actually like their schedule, and that I just said, go out and play somebody. They're doing exactly that. They're playing Indiana. They're playing Notre Dame even.
Jesus.
They're going to have some guys they're going to have to hope are extremely good for them this season. I think Cincinnati will be that mid-major dark horse the entire year that pretty much most of the country will be rooting for them to break into the playoff. And being at 8, they've got a very good shot of it.
Yeah, many people were disappointed that Cincinnati didn't get in, but obviously because COVID, in my opinion, kind of hindered what they could do. But they played a bowl game against Georgia and got beat, so you can't really say much about that.
Well, that was kind of a weird game in general that Cincinnati, I think, tried to just kind of. They wanted that game to end in the third quarter very badly.
Yeah.
And speaking of Notre Dame, here they are at number 9.
Like, besides that the game against them beating Clemson, which deserved win, even though I didn't want them to win. Notre Dame, has never impressed me. I know, for granted, yes, they play relatively good teams for the most part, but I still don't see much from them at all. I mean, if they're still playing a mediocre USC team every year, Michigan, who's not really that great if they're even on the schedule, I don't see much at all from Notre Dame. Now, for granted, Notre Dame will probably be better than almost every team they play, but they gotta constantly be consistently dominant, and they gotta actually get out of if they make the playoffs, they gotta get past the semis.
Exactly.
To really prove anything. Otherwise, everyone's going to be like, oh, you guys just got lucky you got there.
Mm-hmm. Then at number 10, we have North Carolina. And this is why? I honestly still don't understand the hype about North Carolina. Is Mac Brown a good coach?
Yes.
Yes. Is North Carolina a talented team?
No.
Probably. But they have to show me something. They could honestly lose at Virginia Tech, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I said no mainly based on, like, whatever talent they have might be good. They don't show it. It doesn't. I'm not impressed. They lost to NC State.
Or they lost to Florida State.
Oh, Florida State. Okay, wrong team. I mean, Florida State was not good.
And that was their first game playing on the road in an actual environment, and they just absolutely collapsed in the first half. They looked lost, and then they were able to rally back and nearly win because Florida State decided they just wanted to sit on the ball for a half and not try to score. But
that's Florida State for you.
It's current Florida State. If this was the old Florida State, they would have
I
know what you're referring to, but if it was
old Florida State, Florida State
they would have ran them over.
They would have ran them over.
And then at number 11, Oregon, I think
they deserve to be in the top 10.
I'm kind of
over of some of the teams that are in front of them. I would have leapfrogged them over Notre Dame and North Carolina.
Yeah, see, I kind of disagree. I think Oregon's the same way, and you got to show me something. If they beat Ohio State, absolutely, zero question whatsoever. But it's like, I I think they're a top 15 team, but 11 is just a little bit high for me.
It's like, well, for me, I know it's like with other teams, it's like, well, you got to show me something. Like you said, for a few of them, it's more or less, well, it's like, obviously, we said with North Carolina, we were both not impressed, and we watched them last year.
Yeah.
They were like, they got lucky with some of their stuff. We don't understand the hype. I think they're better than Notre Dame. So that's why I would place them in the top 10. And that's not saying they are a top 10 team. It's saying that if we're going by placement, they're better.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, like you said, you got to prove something.
Yeah, and Wisconsin at 12, I do like Wisconsin at 12. I
Yeah.
think they will be a pretty good team this year. They're just always, they're one of those teams that's just always there and always will be there, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
They opened the season up with Penn State at home, big noon kickoff, the whole shebang. So Camp Randall will be rocking to start the year. Now, 13, we have Florida. Florida will actually be kind of in an interesting spot in that they play Florida Atlantic to start the year, and Florida Atlantic named their starting quarterback as N'Kosi Perry, who was the backup for Miami last year, who was in that bowl game against Oklahoma State.
He played really well.
So I think, now I'm not saying Florida Atlantic's going to win that game or anything,
But
but that's just kind of one of those intriguing matchups to think about. Hey, look at this guy who played for Miami last year. Now he's at FAU playing the Gators, who will have Emory Jones. I'm pretty sure Emory Jones will be the starting quarterback for the Gators. That allows you to do kind of more dual threat stuff than you could with Trask.
Yeah. I will say the one thing with Florida is like, you lost Kyle Trask, you lost
You lost a lot.
You lost a lot of players, and it's gonna be like, well, how do they reload? But obviously, like the preseason polls favor them.
Yes.
But it's like, I just don't see much with Florida. I mean, for like to be safe for me, if I'm placing Florida, they're not in the top 15. But I'm not going to move them out of the top 20 because they could probably still be good.
Yeah.
But I would play it safe. It's like, hey, we didn't rank them as high, but I feel like they're just too high, just by a little.
And then at number 14, we have Miami right after, who we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. De'Aaron King, great. Miami itself,
No.
I'm just not that impressed with the ACC, really.
It's a lot of. I mean, when it's Clemson and
When it's Clemson and
Nobody
friends,
else.
basically, or more like enemies for the rest of the ACC at this point. But
I mean, when Clemson is just that much better than everyone else. I mean, the other schools, they're not big on football as Clemson is in a lot of aspects. Now, yes, Miami is a football
yeah,
school, and same thing with Florida State, but Florida State hasn't been good in years, it feels like.
yeah,
Since Jameis Winston's won the national title.
that's
And
8 years ago.
Yeah, and they've been bad ever since. And Miami hasn't been like, yes, they finally are a competitive again, but I wouldn't even really call them competitive because they're not a title favorite.
Well, Miami to me is a team, and you'll see this a lot, that they feed off of hype. If it's a big time game, night game, big name opponent, they will be absolutely locked and loaded. But if it's like an 11 a.m. game at Pittsburgh or something, they come out flat, man. They're like what I like to call a Jekyll and Hyde team, where depending on the day you get them, they might be super entertaining to watch, super energetic, make it some amazing plays that look great, or they might look absolutely terrible for a few quarters and have to settle in.
And it's why people don't take them seriously.
Exactly.
I mean, yes, they're at 14, but I don't take them seriously unless they start winning games.
Speaking of not
convincing.
taking teams seriously, USC at 15.
Why are they even in the top 25?
Well, Keaton Slovis is a good quarterback, and seeing what USC is trying to do, once again, kind of adopting that spread and air raid, even if you think about it, they are going to enjoy throwing the ball. I think they'll easily be a competitor in the Pac-12 South. That's goes without question. But on the national stage, I really don't think they're going to be that great in terms of nationally. Will they be a top 15 team by the end of the year? Who knows? We can't really say right now.
Really
But
just depends on how, in my opinion, it really depends on how bad their division is or how the Pac-12 is in general, because they can win their non-conference games and whatever, but they are not, when it comes to conference play, they have not shown up besides the last year that Sam Darnold was there.
yes.
On that, they haven't been good. They were never good, barely good before, and haven't been good since. I mean, they've been mediocre.
Yeah. And then 16 LSU is another one of these where it's like, yes, they have potential, but at the same time, we don't know a whole lot about them.
We don't know what Coach Ogeron.
Ogeron.
I can't now say that right.
Just Coach O is always.
Coach O, but we don't know what he has, how he's developed these other players. If they can show. I mean, yes, they showed some forms of good brilliance, but they still had star players from that 2019 squad. Now none of them are there anymore.
Especially with the scandals going around LSU too, the allegations there.
Ooh,
I
boy.
really don't know what is happening at LSU this year.
I just USC and LSU, they're not top 20 teams.
Yeah. Speaking of a team that should be a top 20 team, Indiana at 17. I'm high on them. I really am. I think they could be a whole lot of fun to watch this year.
I really like what their head coach has been doing.
Oh yeah.
He's made them better. They went from being a bottom feeder of the one of them. At least they were better than Rutgers, but that's not saying much. But now that they're actually competitive and they brought back pretty much everybody from the previous year.
There's one thing that I was watching one day, one of the Indiana games. They're showing what Coach Allen, head coach of Indiana, what he did in the preseason in the locker room, and I thought it was super cool they did this. He gave every player a copy of the schedule and said, circle what games you think we can win. And so, like Ohio State wasn't circled and things like that. And then he ripped the schedule up in front of him and said, if you don't think we can win every game, why are we even here?
Yeah.
And sure enough, they go on a run. I'm not saying that was the thing that did it, but that, to me, that's one of those, like,
it's a motivation.
Exactly. You gotta pump your team up, and I think that's something to me that was just absolutely great.
If you're a head coach and you're not as pumped up as your players, if you're not more than they are, what are you doing there? It's like you gotta feed the energy. You gotta make those guys believe they can win. And I think Indiana, in their side of the, they're on the same side of Ohio State is, right?
Yes, they're in the East.
Okay, so it's like they're obviously the second favorite. I'd probably still have Ohio State better than, but Ohio State once again with the new quarterback and because Justin Fields isn't there, and you got also they're reloading.
Yes.
I still want to see how Indiana can overcome them because they should have beaten them last year.
Yes, and especially with the game being in Bloomington this year, we might see a new champion in the Big Ten East.
And we would gladly take that.
Seeing an Indiana versus whoever comes out of the West would be super fun. And speaking of super fun, Indiana's opponent week 1, number 18, Iowa. So Iowa, once again, I don't know why they're here at 18. It's a welcome surprise to be sure, though. Iowa to me is consistency. They are always 7-5 at the worst, 8-4, 9-3, 6-6 is a bad year for them. Kirk Ferentz is a very consistent coach.
The thing is with Iowa, and this is how they've always been for years, and maybe except for a few years where they weren't as great. They're usually usually that third or fourth, not third, but probably third or fourth, fifth team that is there, that is always competing. They just can't win the one or two big games they need to win, and they might accidentally drop a game.
Yes,
that's how they usually are, but they're always a top competitor.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's
they're a team that don't get your hopes up on them unless it's at the end of the year and they're still there.
Yeah, it's like if they only have like 1 or 2 losses going into the final couple weeks, you can get a little hype for them, but I wouldn't be as big on them.
If they beat Indiana and Iowa State though, I don't think it's back to back, but if they beat them both pretty early on in the season, absolutely start talking about Iowa. But I think there's a very good chance they start 0-2.
Yeah.
But knowing Iowa, they'll probably somehow go 1-1.
I'd say out of between Iowa State and Indiana, I think they're likely to that'd probably be Iowa State's one game they drop early.
I think so.
But Iowa State, I would have them going undefeated into conference play.
Yeah.
But I still think if they lose a game in it's definitely the Iowa game
It's definitely Iowa, yeah.
because they struggle against beating Iowa.
Mm-hmm. And number 19, we've got Penn State here. Now, Penn State will go to Wisconsin. Penn State, once again, is kind of – they started very bad. They started, I believe, 0-4.
They were like 0-4, 0-5.
And then they switched it up, got some easier teams in there. And then they finished the season 500. But at that point, no one cared about them.
No.
They had been thrown out of the national picture by that point.
They were thrown out of the national picture after they lost to Indiana.
Exactly.
I mean, this was before we realized Indiana actually was competable, was actually good.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, many people still think Indiana had a fluke season. I think Indiana will actually be the second or the best team coming out of the Big Ten West.
Or the East.
The East, not bad.
Yeah, if Indiana's in the Big Ten West.
I keep thinking they're in the West, despite the fact they're not.
I mean, I'd love to see Wisconsin and Indiana play and all that fun stuff.
If Indiana was in the West, they would have won the whole thing.
They
would have won their division.
I think so.
But that's last year.
Yeah.
But
and then at 20, we've got Washington, which I could see why they want to put Washington in here, but
yeah.
Once again, it's one of those like
I feel like they were put in there because Pac-12.
I think we're just my favorite part of the AP preseason every year is once we get to about this point, it's just pulling names out of a hat. It feels like
it feels like it.
You get one or two teams that are just kind of the raise the eyebrows a bit. The one I'm kind of raising my eyebrows on is still down the list, but yep, 20 for Washington. I think that's fine. I mean, once again, show me something first. I'm going to say that with most teams, but the real one, 21, Texas. Is Texas back? The answer, once again, probably not. Not going to sugarcoat it.
Until they can have back-to-back double-digit win seasons, they're not back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what Sarkisian does there. As an OU fan, I hope it goes poorly, but
I think everyone wants it to go poorly.
I think a lot. Yeah,
unless you're a Texas fan.
Unless you're a Texas fan, pretty much everyone is rooting against you. The entire Big 12 is. Arkansas and A&M are. Most of the SEC will be because they want to beat you up once you get there. But I mean, they start the year with Louisiana Lafayette. I'm not going to lie here. Louisiana Lafayette might win that game.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
Lafayette. I mean, remember Lafayette did beat Iowa State last year too.
That was one thing where that was the game where Iowa State was trying to. That game, I think they went in there rusty. If Iowa State
it was the
went
first
there,
game of the year.
Yeah, because if Iowa State went in there, I think not as like if that was the second game of the year, Iowa State would have beat them. Maybe. But that depends on. Louisiana was hot.
Yes.
Louisiana played really well that game.
Well, they are the Raging Cajuns, so.
They are hot-blooded, so.
Yeah, and then at 22, we have Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers, coming off an absolutely fantastic season.
Sadly, they didn't stay undefeated. But
yeah,
they were. That was a fun team to. Just to kind of see how they're thinking.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the mid-majors in football is, do they get as much attention? No. Can they be just as fun? Yes. When you get to play on that, what I like to call the surf and turf, because it is blue, it does look like they're on the ocean a bit.
Yeah.
Being out by the beach. I mean, they're just such a fun team to watch, and I really want to see them do well this year. Same goes with Louisiana Lafayette at 23, who I guess is just abbreviated to Louisiana now, so congratulations on the name change.
I will say that it's just easier for when putting the stuff in.
I know. I always liked Louisiana Lafayette because you could do ULL, so you could say OL. You could just abbreviate it as OL. And then Raging Cages, we already kind of pretty much talked about them. I'm excited for them. I mean, it's always fun seeing the Sun Belt teams do well. The Fun Belt is always fun, as the name would imply.
Pretty much.
And then at 24, we have Utah. Utah is always one of those teams that just is there. Kind of like Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And Iowa can be at times. They're just always consistently there. They will cause problems. They will always, it feels like we'll get one random upset win on someone. And then at 25, Arizona State. What is Arizona State?
I don't get that.
I mean, you can look at the others receiving votes. Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, TCU.
I mean,
Liberty even.
I mean, these these first four that are receiving votes that are just outside, they deserve that
25th spot more than Arizona State. But
I would say it so, but looking at Arizona State's schedule, they could do the exact same thing we talked about with Illinois earlier, where they could just kind of cakewalk their way through the start of the year. Southern Utah, UNLV at home. Your first big test is at BYU.
And BYU is actually playing a lot more tougher teams this year.
Yeah.
That on who they scheduled.
Well, I think that was more mainly a COVID thing last year.
It's true, but still, it's like they're actually, but BYU is actually being more competitive, but you could say that. But Arizona State, I don't really see much with that. Like, Oklahoma State deserves to be in there, at least that they'll round up that last spot more than Arizona State. I just never seen much from Arizona State, maybe besides a couple of years in the last decade where they were somehow competitive, but they were never a top team.
Now, we've pretty much talked about most of the major games that are going to come up here covering the top 25, but there are a few that we really didn't get to, and some of them for better reasons than others. Let's start actually here with a Thursday night game that we've got. This is really kind of a clash of mid-majors that most people know. Boise State goes to UCF.
Ooh, that's a long drive.
This will be a fun game. Gus Malzahn's first game coaching UCF. It'll be in the Bounce House in Orlando. Place will be alive.
Most definitely.
So now that we're kind of in the final 30 minutes of the show here, I guess you could say it's prediction time.
Predictions, yeah.
Yeah, since we will not be doing this show Thursday due to Northwestern football going on. If you're listening and you can make it to the game, please show up. It's the blackout. Wear black. I understand it's going to be hot outside, but please just be rowdy and loud and support our teams.
Make sure you have a little fan with you.
Yeah. Also, probably get some sunscreen, too. At 6 o'clock kick.
Yeah.
But Boise State, UCF, who do you got winning this game?
I would say with how Boise State hasn't been as good on the offensively, and it hasn't really been that much of a threat. They haven't really been there. They haven't been considered a great mid-major team in quite a while. I mean, they're not. I mean, like they're one of the better ones in the mid-major. They're just not. They don't stand out as like they used to. They kind of just faded back. UCF, I think they still are. They still play really well. I would say UCF probably by 17.
Yeah, I'm going to go with UCF as well. And the spread agrees with it. It's UCF currently the 5-point favorite to win this game. I think we might see that go up as not by much because we're almost here, but I think that's one to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And then going back to Ohio State, Minnesota, we talked about that one a little bit earlier. I think we are probably both in agreement that Ohio State wins that game.
Ohio State wins that game, but it's not. But I think Minnesota plays a lot better.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Minnesota is winning at halftime, and we start seeing people come out. Oh my goodness, what is happening at Ohio State? That's gonna come. That's gonna happen. That's just the era we live in now, sadly, where
pretty much
people are kind of way too happy to jump on a team.
Yeah.
For doing something.
So. But I think Ohio State comes out of that and wins, no problem.
Yeah. And then Friday night, fun time, 5 o'clock, North Carolina going to Virginia Tech. Blacksburg will be riled up and ready to go. And let's see, who do we have as a favorite? Vegas is giving North Carolina the 5.5-point favorite. And I think it'll be closer than that. I'm going to say North Carolina by 3.
I would probably do North Carolina by 9.
Okay.
But, it's close for the most part, but I think at the very end, North Carolina gets a little tiny bit of separation. Not by much though. I mean, I haven't really seen much from Virginia Tech as much. I mean, that's not saying they're a bad team. They could get you.
They absolutely could. Let me see here. Next game that I want to preview here that we haven't talked about, and we'll get to some of the main Saturday games. We'll save those for the end. Well, let's talk about Saturday night game that we talked about UCLA earlier, and as well as LSU.
Yeah.
The Tigers going down to the Rose Bowl to play the Bruins. Knowing that we've seen a UCLA game, LSU only a 3-point favorite. What do you think?
I'm going with it's considered an upset, but I'm picking UCLA to
You're
win.
picking with the Bruins.
I haven't seen. I know LSU had some moments, but I don't really know hardly anyone from that is at LSU could be a factor in LSU making it competitive or winning. So I think I have UCLA winning by about 10.
Okay.
They may just kind of. It's like one of those things where they get ahead and they kind of just stay ahead.
Yeah.
LSU can't really do as much near the end. Think they'll hand LSU their first loss.
Yeah. I definitely don't think we'll see some heroics like we saw when Texas A&M came out to the Rose Bowl. I definitely don't think we'll see anything like that. But I've got LSU winning. This is the first one we disagree on.
Yeah, I just don't see much from LSU. UCLA, I know they still have improved. They need to make more improvements. They still have a lot to prove, but I still think UCLA wins that one. They get their first test victory.
All right. Now, jumping ahead, Sunday night, the Labor Day special, as I like to call it now, or the night before Labor Day, I guess you could say.
It's the Labor Day special, basically.
Notre Dame goes to Florida State.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame will win. I would not be surprised. This is going to be a fun atmosphere, I think. Florida State will be riled up. They'll be ready to go. It'll be such a fun game for about one quarter, and then Notre Dame will start hammering them down. Notre Dame's a 7.5-point favorite. I think they win by double digits.
They win by double digits. I'd say they win by over 20.
Wow.
That Florida State has not that good.
I know.
Well, unless they've made improvements over the course of through recruiting or developing their current players, I don't see anything.
All righty. And now the final one of the weekend. Two teams we have not talked about at all this week, meeting in Atlanta Monday night, 7 o'clock. Louisville and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the 10-point favorite. We'll have Lane Kiffin's Rebels, who, I mean, they played competitive with Alabama last year.
Yeah,
They
didn't have
beat
a
Indiana
defense.
in a bowl game.
If they actually had a competitive defense, they could have upset Alabama.
Yeah.
But until they make some improvements. I know I'm not saying anything about this game, but if Ole Miss makes improvements to their defense, they'll be really good this year.
Yes.
But for this game, Ole Miss just outplays Louisville on offense.
I think so.
It's a slugfest. It might either be a slugfest or
I'm expecting a shootout personally. I think
that's what I was like, a slugfest.
I mean, we've got an over/under of 76 officially.
That's going to be an offensive game where
we're getting into the high-scoring ones
I think
on this one.
Louisville gets outscored late in the game.
All righty.
Or maybe early on. Who knows?
Yeah. Now let's go to some of the bigger games we talked about already this week. First one up on the docket, Penn State and Wisconsin. We already mentioned 11 a.m. kickoff on Fox here in Madison. What do you think about that game?
I would say if Penn State makes some key improvements, actually getting the quarterback is good out the gate, not struggling in the first game, and their defense holds up well, because I don't think there was really much of an issue with their defense. It was their offense that could not stay consistent.
Mm-hmm.
That's what cost them those 4 or 5 games they lost, was their offense did not show up.
Yeah.
But if they show up, they'll be very competitive with Wisconsin, but I think the Badgers wear them down.
I think this is going to be a classic Big Ten game. Wisconsin's a 5.5-point favorite. I really would not be surprised if this is one of those first to 24 wins type of games.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Wisconsin's got an offense. I'm not saying they don't, but they've also got a defense.
Yes. I would say I would just, in more case of Big Ten, I'd say Badgers by 7.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. Alabama and Miami, we both kind of already agreed Alabama's going to win this one.
It's going to be.
The line is already 19.5 in Bama's favor, and it might get even bigger.
I think Bama rolls them through the first quarter.
Yeah, I think the Tide will definitely roll that day.
Tide will probably win that game by maybe 25, 26 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So Bama will control the water in this game between the Crimson Tide and the Hurricanes. Now, this is another kind of fun one. Indiana at Iowa, top 20 matchup in Iowa City. Iowa is given the edge at home, but 3-point favorite. So, and once again, very low over-under, an over-under of 45.
Oh man.
Which, for those
That's
who
really
do not
low.
know what an over-under is, now I've said the term a few times, that's basically what Vegas determines as how many combined points will be scored in a game. So Vegas only thinks 45 total points will be scored between Indiana and Iowa.
Depending on how Iowa's defense is, I would not go for the over under on that.
Yeah.
I'd say that game undershoots it by probably maybe 10.
Yeah, so you're taking the under on that
I
one?
would if I was a betting man, I'd take the under.
Yeah.
But I'd say in regards to cuz obviously I'm big on Indiana this year. I hope they do well. I would say Indiana just edges Iowa to hand them their first loss.
I think so, too. I think Indiana will be, both teams will be extremely excited to be going out here.
Yeah, they're gonna
I would not be surprised if this looks like a classic Iowa upset for a while, but I think it'll go the way of the last time Penn State came to Kinnick, highly ranked, where Indiana just does enough to escape at the end.
yeah.
I've got the Hoosiers in a very tight game.
Yeah.
And now we get Louisiana and Texas, another top 25 battle, and Texas is only an 8-point favorite. Considering the fact that it's a Sun Belt team, you would think it'd be higher, but even Vegas acknowledges Lafayette is no joke.
Mm-hmm. I would for this one. Texas has a lot to prove. They have a new starting quarterback.
Yes.
They'll have their system is gonna. Though it's probably more likely the same, but it's with a different coach. He has different stuff for it.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense, nothing really. Since they're still they're Big 12. Don't see much change with their defense. Louisiana, Lafayette, if they are just how they were last year, which I would think the reason why they're ranked the way they are because they brought a lot of people back.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Louisiana beats the Longhorns by 10.
Really?
I'd say they get the upset.
Now, as much as I would love to believe Lafayette will come in and win this game, to me, season opener, I think Texas will struggle. I really think there will be a few moments where it kind of looks like Lafayette might even blow them out.
Not to cut you off, but I think that when's the last time Longhorns have actually been good in a their opening game because they've been bad. They've struggled badly almost every season.
I think the last time they really looked good in an opening game was beating Notre Dame. If you remember that,
yeah, that one game where the Texas is back.
Yes, where Texas's back came from. We'll forever thank Joe Tessitore for that one.
Man, great. That was great.
Great call.
Great
it
call
just didn't end up being true.
It was the game itself was great, and but it turned out those two teams were not as good as we thought they were.
No, not at all. But that's what made it great is they were actually two evenly matched teams.
Yep.
So
who'd you pick?
I've got Texas winning this one. I think it'll be very close, and it might even involve Texas having to stage a good comeback at the end. But I just refuse. As much as I want to go with my heart and pick the Raging Cajuns, my brain will say no. Texas will find a way to win this game.
I just don't. Because they need to make adjustments to that with the new coach and everything.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be enough to get the victory, and I think Raging Cajuns roll them.
All righty. And now the final game we've got to pick here:
Georgia
and Clemson. Clemson is only a 3-point favorite. 6:30 kickoff Saturday night in Charlotte. It will be absolutely rowdy for this one. A rivalry renewed between the two, and
This is the one game that I think is the toughest.
I think so. I think these teams are so balanced against each other. They're so evenly matched.
Oh yeah, I know Georgia has a couple of people out, but I don't think that would stop. It's going to stop Georgia from making it competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson, obviously, you have a great quarterback. I'm not going to say his name because I can't say it. But it's just as Clemson, obviously, their offense is going to be good. I question their defense. I'm not going to question Georgia's. Georgia's always been good at their defense.
Yes.
I mean, Kirby Smart, great defensive mind.
That is their calling card, is always defense.
So the one thing problem with Georgia is can their offense come out firing? Last time they had a really good offense was that 2017 team that should have won the national title but didn't.
Yes.
I think that was their best chance. But I would say if they beat Clemson, they have and they run the table, they have a golden ticket to probably be national champions. But I'm going to pick Clemson because of their offense.
All right.
I think their offense will be too much for Georgia, and I'm not as confident in Georgia's offense.
Mm-hmm.
But I would probably give Clemson 10.
Yeah.
Clemson, and I would take the over-under on that.
All right. What would you rather take? The over-under's 51.
Oh, wait, no, 51. Well, Clemson could jump. I'm not saying Georgia can't score.
Yeah.
I think Georgia probably gets maybe 20 points, and I think Clemson jumps on just 31.
So that would be right at.
I know I'm picking it right on there. But
Yeah.
I think they beat them by 11. I know I said 10, but I think it's probably 11.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, these are games that college football is all about.
Yeah.
Seeing two great teams go at each other. We need more games like this,
Oh,
and
most
we
definitely.
definitely have in the playoff era as this has gotten more and more competitive.
It's also convinced teams you have to go out and play better teams, because at the BCS, if you had arguably the best record and you just lucked out that your conference was also good, you were automatically in. This time, you actually have to go out and play teams outside your conference.
Absolutely. And so I am going to take Clemson in this one. I'm going to say Clemson by 7.
That's a reasonable pick.
I think that Georgia will keep it close. I think Clemson, though, will take advantage of those injuries and that, not inexperience to say, but how Georgia's offense is. It is not, it's not an Alabama offense or an Oklahoma offense. But this is a great test for Georgia because they'll have to place teams like Clemson. If they want to go anywhere, you've got to beat the top.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be in the same position as Texas A&M we mentioned. They're absolutely a fantastic team. It's just, can they win?
Yeah, pretty much. And
I don't think they're going to be beating Clemson.
And that is pretty much all our big games.
That is all the big ones. So we really only disagree on 2.
Yeah, that's only a couple.
So that's kind of interesting to think about. We kind of think alike on most of these.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I want to do to kind of close us out here is to kind of finish up by talking about some of the conferences.
Yeah.
Kind of predicting who we think will win or who will be in the division champions.
Yeah.
Who will be our division champions? Who will play each other in the conference title games?
Most definitely.
We're going to do the major conferences today just because, well, Conference USA is always kind of a mixed bag.
You don't know who's going to win.
The mid-majors, I will give credit for, are so unpredictable most years.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, I will say for the Sun Belt, obviously we have Louisiana and Appalachian State. Appalachian State will always be a favorite.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they'll always win. Have they won? I'm just making sure. Have they won the Sun Belt? Hasn't they been it, or have they
I'm
not?
pretty sure. I want to say they have, but I'm not 100% sure.
But they've all they're one of the few teams that have jumped from the FCS to the FBS and have actually been good, just coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But that one's a toss up between those two.
Yeah.
But I'm not can't really say much about it.
Coastal and Louisiana and App State. And never count out Troy or Georgia Southern either. Those teams are always lying around ready to do something.
Most definitely.
Now, we're going to kind of work our way from top to bottom here alphabetically. We're going to start with the American.
Oof,
and I think I most definitely think Cincinnati has to be in.
Cincinnati. I don't. These are obviously you have Houston, Navy, SMU might come out of nowhere and be just like how they were last year. Who knows? But I just don't see. This is literally Cincinnati's conference to lose. They're the absolute favorite. I don't know anyone who would pick anyone over them.
Mm-hmm.
They should they should roll through their conference. I don't know how they'll do against their non-con.
Mm-hmm.
They're I think they're one of the few teams that could run the table.
They really could.
depending on how their season goes.
Looking at their schedule here, you get Miami of Ohio, Murray State, and then back to back. Well, this is the nice part. They do have a bye week in between Indiana and Notre Dame.
I would say they could edge Indiana, even though I would still want to see Indiana win. Because Cincinnati's always been a competitive, good football team
Yes.
through the years. Their program's always been relatively good because obviously they recruit Ohio. So, and Ohio's a great,
Great football rich area.
Yes, so they're always good. But I would probably pick them over Indiana to probably do that. But obviously, I'm saying we haven't gotten there yet.
Exactly.
So I don't know. We'll see how it is. but I would say they could run the table. They could actually upset Notre Dame, and
I would not be surprised if Cincinnati beat both Indiana and Notre Dame. It would
if
be
they-
very tough. It'd be two big road wins, though.
Oh, most definitely.
And they would be the best shot a group of five has had since Houston in 2016, really.
Oh yeah, I would. They would be the team to run the table of a mid-major to actually have a shot. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And then moving on to the ACC, it's Clemson.
Clemson.
It's just Clemson. Now, the real battle is not who wins the ACC. The real battle is who wins the Coastal Division. Because you have Miami and North Carolina, and then Pitt is always a wild card.
Most definitely.
Virginia and Virginia Tech, you never know. Virginia Tech has been a bit down from where they once were. Virginia's been a bit up from where we usually think of them.
yeah,
Duke is Duke.
Duke is Duke.
Georgia Tech is still getting there, I would say, in that they are trying to build that program back up.
Yeah, I actually do miss Georgia Tech actually being competitive.
It was always neat seeing a triple option attack that you don't see much of nowadays except for the service academies.
Pretty much.
So that was always kind of the neat thing about them. But there were days where it just kind of felt like a gimmick. But there were other days where it legitimately worked well for them.
But yeah, Clemson, I don't see them. Like, it doesn't matter who wins the Coastal.
Yeah.
If you can't get through Clemson, you're really no point. You're going to be an afterthought.
Exactly.
Really quickly. I mean, I would say out of the Coastal, it's either Miami or North Carolina, but then again,
It's
who knows
really-
how that it depends on how Pittsburgh is or how Virginia Tech does.
Exactly.
But
To me, it's really a coin flip between those two. I would give the edge to North Carolina, personally, just because I
Yeah.
think they have slightly more talent than Miami does on the defense.
I'd say when it comes to way those two teams, between those two teams, North Carolina is more competent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying their league's better; they're just more competent.
Yeah.
But that's really all it is.
And then the Big 12. The Big 12, I believe it's going to be Oklahoma. The one thing I have against Oklahoma, though, is the lack of depth at running back. This is a story that has kind of developed over the past few days. TJ Pledger transferred in the offseason to Utah. Then you lose Seth McGowan. Then you lose Marcus Major a few days ago. He's academically ineligible. Trey Bradford now just decides to leave the program a few days before the season starts.
Oh my!
You're left
goodness.
with Kennedy Brooks, Eric Gray, and a few walk-ons. So I don't know if we're going to see the Mario Williams turns into a running back. That's probably not going to happen. Just if we can find any walk-on to give us 8 solid carries, that's all I'm asking for. Just a few solid carries a game.
because as great as Rattler is, you can't win based on the quarterback. You don't have a running back. What are you doing?
Exactly. The offense for Oklahoma, a lot of people like to think they throw the ball a lot. They run the more than they throw it.
Yeah, they do.
And so I think Oklahoma will still win the Big 12.
But it really just depends on. You got to hope that your running backs are healthy.
Exactly.
If they're not healthy, there's a good chance you'll either get edged in the regular season barely if the worst scenario happens, or you lose in the Big 12 title game.
Yes.
But I would still have OU as the favorite. Obviously, Iowa State is the next one up. I would say if anything happens with Oak, they're probably more likely to drop one game, run the table to the Big 12 title game, and maybe lose, or they might win it. Who
Yeah.
knows? But I would say Oklahoma is the favorite.
I would say so. I think Iowa State, though, it's finally time for my one hot take of this, is that I think Iowa State doesn't make it. I think they find a way to mess this up. I think this is too perfect for them. I think they will find a way to either lose at K-State, at K-State, Oklahoma State at home, at West Virginia, and Texas. Of these four, I'm going to go ahead and say they lose 2 of them.
I'd say they're more likely to lose to a. It's really also depends on how Oklahoma State is.
Yes.
Until Oklahoma State shows some consistency on offense, I'm never going to say they're a favorite.
Yeah.
But I will say they could drop a game to Oklahoma State. It's either that or K-State or Texas. Texas will be the one game I think they will probably drop. But they're more likely to that one beat everyone else. They lose to Oklahoma or they beat Oklahoma in Norman somehow, and then go to the Big 12 title game. I think they'll still not make that jump. Like they'll still be a top 10 team throughout the year, but they cannot afford this. Like their scenario is too perfect that they mess this up.
Well, we don't know when we'll see them this good again.
Yeah, this was like a stars align thing that Oklahoma State supposedly had last year.
Yeah,
where they were a favorite and then everything just imploded on offense.
Well, the other thing with the Big 12 is every year Oklahoma's opponent has changed. It was TCU, then it was Texas, then it was Baylor, then it was Iowa State. I don't think it can be the same team twice. I think it might be, and this is going to sound crazy, look out for Kansas State this year.
Oh, I wouldn't be like they're a team to be scared of.
They really are. Chris Kleinman, head coach of Kansas State, has done a great job turning them into what they were under Snyder again. Now, that sounds a bit weird because it's only been a few years, but the tail end of those Bill Snyder teams were not the best teams in the world.
No.
I think they're slowly getting back. They were hampered by injuries and COVID last year.
If they didn't have the injury, especially to their starting quarterback, Thompson.
Yeah, Skylar Thompson.
If they just don't get hit with the injury bug and hardly had to deal with COVID, they were a favorite. They were rolling. They were doing well, and then
they
proceeded to get injured, and they couldn't do anything. And that's not their fault. But if they can stay healthy and hopefully avoid any COVID problems, they're a team to watch out for.
And then another team to watch out for, the other purple team, TCU. I think I've heard good things about TCU. This might be a year they make a jump, maybe. I'm not saying they are going to play OU in the Big 12 title game, but they're a team definitely to always watch out for.
I think they could finish the year probably in third or fourth and be a favorite, go to a good bowl game.
Exactly. And, that's the thing about the Big 12 is, aside from Kansas and Texas Tech this year, every Big 12 team has a definitive strength about them that just kind of feels different from the other teams.
Most definitely.
You have to kind of find a style of play. Oklahoma, everyone kind of knows about them. TCU is a pretty usually well-balanced team. If their offense can take the next step, that would be absolutely fantastic for them. K-State, you know what you're going to get. Skylar Thompson's going to be able to just run a K-State offense, basically. QB runs.
Houdini. They're going to be that team that's going to Houdini you.
Yeah, Baylor, Dave Aranda, they're going to be a sound defensive team. They're one of the few teams that honestly scares me that they might be the team to beat Oklahoma this year. Trap game in Waco, and Aranda looked very good at figuring out what Riley wanted to do last year in Norman, holding Oklahoma to only 24.
But the thing is, how is their offense going to look like?
Exactly. I believe they named Gary Bohannon starter a few days ago, who we did see in the 2019 Big 12 title game against Oklahoma.
Yeah, but if he doesn't make a few mistakes, They could have knocked off Oklahoma, but I can't really say much about that.
That's just how those Big 12 title games work.
We'll just have to wait and see.
Exactly.
And I would say with Oklahoma State, if their defense is not in question, because their defense is good. Obviously, they got to be able to handle certain aspects. I think the weakest link is the secondary, but that's always been a weak link for almost every Big 12 team. But if they could one of their safeties. They always have like one good safety, but their corners are sometimes suspect at times. And then the free
You
safety
find the
is
credit.
like, where are you?
Yeah.
But on that, it's like the offense needs. If the offense can show consistency, OSU could be a title contender, maybe. But it really comes down to, can Spencer Sanders fix his turnover ratio? That's the one thing. He has more interceptions than he does touchdowns. And we've seen him ball out. Like when he played Texas, he threw over 300 to 400 yards, but he had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and a fumble that cost the team.
Exactly.
If those turnovers don't happen, OSU goes into Bedlam undefeated. But whether they win or lose that game is up in the air. That depends on how Spencer plays.
Mhm.
But that OU defense was so good that game,
Yeah.
so I can't really say much
If
about
Ronnie
that.
Perkins decides to make it his personal mission
Right.
to destroy the entire Oklahoma State team, but
But I will say that OU is the favorite to go into. I would still pick them to win until another team otherwise knocks them off.
now looking at the Big Ten here, I think Ohio State is still the favorite. They really are. I think it'll be Ohio State and Wisconsin personally for the
it will
title
be-
game.
It's Ohio State. Ohio State will always be the favorite until they somehow get knocked off.
Yes.
Indiana would have to either run the table or hope that they can, with a one loss, get Ohio State at home.
Yeah. Indiana, I mean, you have to thread the needle. You have to beat Ohio State,
Oh, most definitely.
and then you have to basically avoid any silly losses.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I mean, sounds easy saying it now, but obviously it's a lot more difficult to prove on the football field.
It's college football. It's losing one game, like just trying to keep with one loss is already too difficult. Going undefeated is way too difficult unless you just happen to be much better than everybody else.
Yes.
I mean, you're not 2020 Alabama or 2019 LSU where you're literally almost better than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But Wisconsin would win Wisconsin's division. It's either that or Northwestern, but depends on how Northwestern's offense is.
Yeah.
But I'd say Ohio State wins.
Now, moving to the Pac-12, this is a kind of more interesting conference, I would say, in that there really is no definitive team. Most conferences, you can kind of pick the one team that dominates, but the Pac-12 has a lot more parity in it, in that you really never know who's going to win the Pac-12. It can be November, and we still may not know who's going to win the Pac-12. But I personally think that the South this year is going to be so up in the air. I've seen people pick Arizona State. I've seen people pick UCLA, USC, Utah, pretty much everyone but Arizona and Colorado. And I honestly think it's going to be Utah. I think they're just always there, and I think they will be able to force USC into some mistakes this year. I think Arizona State will be a good team. Maybe they sneak an upset in on someone. But I think this is going to be Utah's year to win the South.
I would agree with you. I think Utah just kind of hangs around. Basically, everyone else beats each other, beat themselves up, and Utah just kind of just right there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the favorite for the North is Oregon.
Yeah, they're the obvious favorite.
They're the obvious, with Washington right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I'm picking Oregon to win the North, basically beat everyone. I think they could possibly. I know they did it. They did it last year during COVID, but I think that might have been a fluke victory. But
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance they could get upset by Oregon State.
It very well could happen.
I mean,
that's always one of those crazy games.
It's called Pac-12 After Dark for a reason.
It's true.
But I think Oregon maybe goes into the title game with 2 losses. Everyone else can't seem to win in their division. So it's going to be, they'll drop a game early and then drop a game against, I want to say Oregon State. Obviously, that's not guaranteed. Depends on how Oregon State is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say they drop 2 games, go to the title game. I'll pick them to beat Utah.
All righty. I think that the North is kind of, it's not as open as the South is, and that the South, it could, I mean, I've heard 4 different people say 4 different answers, but the Pac-12 North, I think it is going to be Oregon. I would not be shocked at all if Utah beat Oregon. that's just how the Pac-12 is at this point.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either.
I
with
think
that,
the
but-
Pac-12 champ will once again probably have like 2 losses or 2 regular season losses, not just saying conference or non-conference. But I think once again the Pac-12 will get left out of the college football playoff.
They'll get left out again.
Yeah, which it feels like they've been that door's been shut on them for a long time. It feels like.
It's been shut on. It's been shut on them since Washington got beat.
Yeah,
I mean, Washington, yes, was a good team through most of the year, but they were not close to good as Alabama was that year.
mm-hmm.
And they don't have the players or none of their teams have been competent enough to either keep one loss or go undefeated because they drop games they shouldn't drop or they lose a hard game.
Exactly.
But it's weird that everyone still likes to act as if the Pac-12 is a superior conference to like the Big 12. I mean, for granted, yes, you're carried by OU and Texas in certain aspects,
but you at least make the playoff.
But OU has made the playoff.
I would argue personally, if we're going to rank the top 5, I would say the Big 12's middle of the pack. I would say the ACC, when you give me ACC top to bottom,
ACC is like the 4th.
I would say it alternates between them and the Pac-12. I would say there are some years the Pac-12 is better, and I mean, you look at the preseason, you've got 5 preseason top 25 teams in the Pac-12.
Yep.
You look at the ACC, you only have 3.
I mean, you hear like even through like the midway point of the season, you don't really hear anything about Pac-12 being a favorite.
No.
Or anyone else outside of Clemson in the ACC. Whereas with the Big 12, you've had Oklahoma State's name thrown in there. You had, obviously, OU's in it every year.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa State's been thrown in there. Baylor at one point was thrown in there. Like you have, and TCU obviously should have made the first one, but they didn't. But the Big 12 has had at least almost half their teams have been like, at one point, have been favorites to go.
Yes.
OSU has been about maybe 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
OU obviously every year. Iowa State recently, last year obviously, and then the year before, if they would have been better in certain aspects, they could have been a favorite.
Yeah.
But Big 12 has teams. The Pac-12 has had no one. Oregon, yes, gets mentioned, but
Exactly.
Oregon, it doesn't last very long.
I think if Oregon loses to Ohio State, I think almost the Pac-12 hype dies immediately.
Yeah, it dies immediately.
Immediately gets shot down. But I'm gonna say Utah over Oregon. I think it's just their time to win. It feels like we've gotten to where it's either Utah or Oregon now. It feels like one of them is always in the title game. It feels that way, even though it's only been, I think, 2 or 3 years like that.
All right.
Now we move on to the final one of the big boy conferences, the SEC. No brainer to me. Alabama's going to win the West.
No, they at most they'd probably maybe lose. They somehow would lose a game to Auburn.
Yeah.
That would be a miracle upset.
Mm-hmm.
But I see Alabama running the table to the conference game.
Yeah. I think it'll be Alabama meets Georgia.
Actually, who's on Alabama's schedule?
Actually, let's look up.
Because they're everyone else. It's like we can think later.
Well,
but
we do get Alabama, Florida this year. That'll be September 18th in the Swamp, which I think that will be a very important game for Alabama. That'll kind of like the Miami game. I think they'll be competitive for a little bit. Then Alabama will kind of start to run away with it.
All right, then. I just wanted to,
Yeah.
because now I've kind of seen the schedule.
To me, their biggest game, Alabama this year, is at Texas A&M.
Yeah,
But I don't know if that will be the biggest game once we're done at the end of the year. But
yeah,
as right now, that looks to be the biggest game.
most definitely. I would obviously still say Alabama.
Alabama
claps them by like 20.
I still think Alabama wins that game.
Yeah, so obviously Texas would finish second. Everyone else falls behind. I would say I would still say they run the table to the conference game title game. The only thing I could see would be a fluke loss would be to Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, they don't get knocked out of the top 4.
Yeah,
at most they only drop 1.
exactly.
I mean, they run the table, and then out of the East, Georgia would be the favorite.
I think Georgia will win the East.
But
I think
it's like Florida. I am not as confident in like we mentioned earlier. We're not as big on them, though. Obviously, their toughest game would be Georgia.
But I think it's Florida having to play Alabama, LSU, Georgia.
They drop two. They drop at least 2 or 3. Either they drop only 2 or they drop all 3. I think Georgia maybe at most maybe loses 1 game. That would probably be to Clemson, like I said earlier. Either that they run the table to the conference title.
Exactly.
But I still think they go into 1 loss. I will still say Alabama wins because experience, and also I'm not as confident in that offense for Georgia.
Exactly.
That's just really what it amounts to. It's so basically, we'll more likely we'll see Clemson and Alabama back in the playoff again.
I think so.
And I would say Ohio State, unless Ohio State drops the game to Indiana.
Yeah.
Or maybe somehow loses in Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't see it.
As much as people would like to see some new teams in, and I think Cincinnati, if Cincinnati beats Indiana and Notre Dame, we could get an interesting scenario of, well, if we have an undefeated Alabama, an undefeated Ohio State, an undefeated Clemson, an undefeated Oklahoma, and an undefeated Cincinnati, who do you leave out? That would be an interesting situation.
That would be a very interesting situation.
I think that would be kind of neat to see. I want to close off tonight here with the Great American Conference. Since we are on the campus of Northwestern Oklahoma State University, I think it would be fitting to end with talking a little bit about some GAC football. So obviously we have the coaches poll, I should say, that came out a few weeks ago, and if I can find it real quick, yes, there we go. As we can see, Ouachita Baptist once again picked first to win the GAC. There's no surprise there. I mean, they're a top 15 team in D2.
Mm-hmm.
Harding second. They're also a top 25 Division II team.
Almost.
They've been 1 and 2 in the conference for a long time. And then Henderson State at 3, another team that you expect to see there. But Oklahoma Baptist at 4 is the first one of the coaches poll that's kind of okay.
It's a bit interesting because it's really the first time in Oklahoma. I would say the first, but it's unusual to see an Oklahoma team in the top 5.
We usually think of the Oklahoma teams as kind of the lower tiers of the GAC, if there are tiers to the GAC. But it is kind of neat to see an Oklahoma team up there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we wish it was, one wearing red and black.
Yeah, most definitely.
But Southern Arkansas being 5th, that's Northwestern's first opponent for the year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll be a very fun matchup here Thursday night.
Yep.
Especially with the blackout, being a night game, being a Thursday night game, it's always kind of a special environment. Something Coach Walter talked about with me and Andrew Santangelo yesterday is that, it kind of feels like playing on Friday night again. It really does, especially being Alva using the same field as Northwestern does. It kind of, not to say a glorified high school game, but it kind of has that nice feel to it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so then East Central at 6. So 2 Oklahoma teams being in the top half of the, projected to be in the top half of the GAC is a little intriguing to see, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Then Arkansas Monticello at 7, Arkansas Tech at 8, Northwestern at 9, Southwestern at 10, Southeastern at 11, and Southern Nazarene wrapping it out at 12.
Not surprised with Southern Nazarene.
Yeah, that's a program that I think it'll take a little bit for them to get where they need to be, but if they put the work in, you never know.
Yeah, that's true.
That's always how it is with college football. You never know.
Yep.
Something could always very randomly change.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of ending here, running down Northwestern's schedule. So we bring that up. Of course, Thursday night, 6 o'clock. Only 1 day, 22 hours away.
Man.
We are so close.
Oh, so close.
And don't forget, there is college football tomorrow on ESPN if you want to watch UAB and Jacksonville State. That'll be at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. But after Southern Arkansas, September 11th, night game at Henderson State. September 18th, another 6 o'clock kick, third 6 o'clock kick in a row. They'll be at Oklahoma Baptist in Shawnee. And so that's really kind of a tough start to the year. And then
Yeah.
September 25th, East Central, October 2nd at Ouachita Baptist.
Like,
We're getting 5 of the top 6 teams projected top 6 in the coaches poll right out of the
right
gate.
out the gate, and that I would say it's really hard to say what we'll do. I think I would say it's just like obviously it's unpredictable with how things been because none of these teams have played each other. We haven't
Exactly.
played any of them. The other teams have not played each other in like 2 years.
Exactly.
So it's very unpredictable how these teams. Obviously, everything is mostly based off how the 2019 season went, but we don't know how good Southern Arkansas is, Henderson State, OBU, East Central. It's really hard to say.
Exactly, especially with Southern Arkansas bringing in a new football coach too.
That's going to be interesting because we don't know how those players will be. Did either of them leave or did they?
Exactly. It'll be, with Mike McCarty coming in for Southern Arkansas. It will be interesting to see really what happens. I mean, Southern Arkansas with 8 returning starters. Northwestern, I believe, has, let me double check here so I don't say the wrong. 14 returning starters to Southern Arkansas's 8. So it really will be kind of
It will pretty much be a new Southern Arkansas team, while we mainly retained about half our starters.
Yes, it will be very fun, obviously.
Most definitely.
Once we get to, as I call it, Gaction.
But I'm just very excited for Northwestern to finally.
I'm just
play some
excited for football to finally be back here on campus. At the end of the day, that is the one thing I'm the most excited for.
Mm-hmm.
Is to finally see Ranger Field filled up again with people and just being out there and supporting them and just getting to see everything that goes along with college football. Because it's not just the game. It's everything around the game, too.
Oh, most definitely. But I will be looking forward to finally being able to play in the for marching band this year.
Yeah.
We'll finally be back. It was really weird doing marching band, not doing any of the home games, and definitely not doing a halftime show.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll finally be able to perform some music, and we'll actually try to get the crowd hyped.
Mm-hmm. And then finishing up the second half of the schedule here, we get homecoming October 9th. That'll be at 4 p.m. against Arkansas Monticello. And then October 16th, you go to Southeastern in Durant. October 23rd, Southern Nazarene at home. Some of the teams you're kind of more competitive with, if you look at it. Arkansas Monticello, Southeastern, Southern Naz. Those are teams we have beaten, not regularly. Well, Southern Nazarene regularly, but the other two are pretty competitive series.
Kind of been off and on.
Yeah. And then October 30th is the next big-time home game when Harding comes to town.
Oh, man.
That will be a very fun game. Anytime you get a top 25 team coming to town, that's always a game you need to be there for.
Most definitely.
And then you finish the year up November 6th at Arkansas Tech in Russellville, and then finishing it up with the classic rivalry, Northwestern versus Southwestern. The one game that most people here care about.
Because obviously they're our biggest rival.
Exactly.
But I'd say that's like, despite all these other games, I wish everyone would come out. I hope everyone comes out for. I know, almost the whole campus will definitely be at that Southwestern game.
Exactly. That is always my kind of one thing is show up to every game. I understand now you might have stuff you want to do or other things, and I completely understand that. But if you can show up to these games, please do. It would be it means the world to everyone for you to show up to these games.
It definitely means a lot to the players.
It means a lot to the players and coaches. It means a lot really just to this campus to see everyone out here supporting the team. Because you're not just supporting the team, you're supporting the university.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe we have made it through everything we were going to talk about today.
Pretty much.
We went a little bit over, about 19 minutes over, you know.
Yeah, but it's perfectly fine. We got started a little late. So.
Exactly. Give some people some more content. So,
but since we won't be able to do so we had to do pretty much all the stuff that we probably would have done on Thursday because we don't have really much of NFL news.
Exactly.
Really much to speak of besides a couple things that happened recently today or yesterday involving cuts and all that, and finally trimming things down. But we'll definitely, me and Cade will be back here next Tuesday to talk to you about after probably the next week of football.
Yep, we will be back here Tuesday night at 5 o'clock. And for all of you who stayed around, I know our viewers kind of fluctuate, and that's perfectly fine. I understand people have other things they need to do. But we just want to absolutely thank you for showing up for this first one. It truly does mean the world to us for you to be here and listening to just a couple of college kids trying to get a radio station back. We're hoping to continue to grow this program and have it be a really important part of the university. So, from Connor Gray, I'm Cade Kennedy saying absolutely thank you for listening tonight
Thank
and
you.
have an absolutely fantastic